Rob Nairn founded the Mindfulness Association in 2010, alongside its directors and Rob's students, Choden, Heather and Norton. The in-depth 4-year meditation trainings offered by the Mindfulness Association are based on and have developed Rob's teachings. This is a training in mindfulness, compassion, insight and wisdom meditation, and is nurturing and spreading Rob's legacy. Rob's great skill was in digesting the spiritual and psychological teachings he received and presenting them in a way that spoke to people as human beings, regardless of their beliefs, philosophies or backgrounds. Over the past 15 years, the Mindfulness Association has taught this approach to thousands of people from all walks of life. We are happy to share with you this video of our community coming together at Rob's Memorial Weekend to honour Rob's memory and to celebrate his life and work.
I think the mindfulness, what was distinctive and what Rob really brought in was the idea of settling, grounding, resting, support, which has really been a kind of like core element of our mindfulness approach. And this very much comes from Mahamudra in Tibetan Buddhism, and he had studied the Mahamudra, and his sense was that people needed a very clear step-by-step way into practice, So I think settling, grounding, resting, support was a really wonderful offering that Rob gave to this emerging mindfulness that we were developing, drawing on Mahamudra. If I really think about what he offered, what really comes to mind is the compassionate mess, When I think of Rob, I think of the compassionate mess. Not that I think he's a mess, but like that teaching, like his kind of sense of, look, if we can just let ourselves off the painful hook of perfectionism and just land on our bum in our own messy humanity, that would be the greatest thing we can do for ourselves and for other people. I mean, that was just fantastic. I remember there was that teaching by Rob Nairn on the compassionate mess. And if we can go forth into the world as a compassionate mess and allow other people to be the messy people that they are, I sometimes think that for me was the greatest thing I learned from Rob, the compassionate mess.
Very often it's difficult to accept ourselves the way we are. And this is very prevalent, I think, in our highly competitive Western culture. Because most people carry a lot of striving, a lot of expectation, and a lot of ideas about who and how and what they should be. And even right now, you might be able to check yourself. Do you have an idea of what sort of person you should be? Now, I can tell you this idea lurks just behind your head. It's always there. And every time you fall short of it, there's a sense of failure or self-recrimination or self-judgment or something like that. Do you ever get any of those? Mm-hmm. The only reason you get that is because somewhere there's this idea that you should be something different. You should be something better. So this is why we bring in compassion training, because somehow we need to free the mind from the effect of that activity. If we don't, our mindfulness sessions end up becoming beating up sessions. We just beat ourselves up. So through our compassion training, we accept whatever the mind does, it's okay. There's nothing wrong.
When we're trying to be compassionate, and I think somewhere, if you've done the compassion teacher training course, we talk about when you're first doing compassion, you have this idea, said Rob, that you have to be some kind of saint, floating around in white robes and being the most compassionate person ever. I'm sure you've all done it. I've done it. And then what happens is something creeps into your mind, something like, Yeah, but I don't actually like her, so I don't really want to be kind to her. I will, because I am Mother Teresa, but I don't really want to be. And then a bit of your mind comes in that goes, oh, you're not really compassionate, are you? And everybody else is. They're all doing it. They're all wearing the white robes. Look at them floating. You're never going to do this. You are a failure. And we can get stuck in that. And for me, listening to Rob talk about that, you kind of get it, but you have to keep learning it.
Having meditated for many years and then being introduced to compassion in such a big way, because I'm on the master's course at Aberdeen, and the compassion module just blew my mind open. And it's been the biggest help for me personally to look at my own stuff with compassion, and has improved my relationships, my working environment. Generally, it's just made me a lot happier and accepting of myself and others.
For me, that continual understanding of my own habit patterns, my own defaults, my compassionate, my human messiness, and that ability to meet that with compassion has changed the way I relate to me, how I relate to others, and I've shared that with others in the teaching. The change and the impact it had on me, I wanted to share with others. And I've been able to see how that now has helped others' lives. So, yeah, it's totally changed the direction of my life.
Within the mind, there's part of us that observes the other part. So you can check this for yourself at the moment. At this moment, your observer is aware of this room. It's working through your eyes and your ears. It's aware of this room. It's also aware of the words. It's also aware of the way I'm waving my hand around. It's also aware of its own thoughts. So there are at least 3 different areas of awareness that your observer is experiencing right now. So your observer is aware of the continual arising of the appearances. Then the observer is analyzing them. And it does this subliminally. Before you realize it, your observer has analyzed particularly what it's feeling. So when emotions arise within your mind, the observer scans the emotions. And it knows, that is a pleasant emotion. That is the neutral one. That is an unpleasant one. Then it reacts. If it likes the emotion, it feels good about it. If it doesn't like it, it feels bad about it. So, you have the situation where let's say I feel bad. Then I feel bad about feeling bad. Have you ever had this happen to you? It's quite interesting, isn't it? It's a double whammy. And interestingly, the initial feeling bad is usually only around about 10 or 15%. The added feeling bad about feeling bad adds somewhere around 85% to it. So it's a much more powerful experience than the initial feeling bad.
You know, this idea of the observer undercurrent is so, I think, fundamental to our approach in the Mindfulness Association, and I think in mindfulness in general. For me, I think in this, I can see different strands that maybe influenced Rob, that we can see in these teachings, because obviously, he was influenced by the great teachers in his life as well. For example, Rob was very strongly influenced by the Indian teacher Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti also, he talks a lot about the observer, and you can find lots of YouTube videos, etc., about Krishnamurti talking about the observer. But as I said, I think Rob's maybe adapted this and really kind of refined this. And I think Rob was also very influenced by Carl Jung, Jungian psychology, and you can find similar ideas I think Jung referred more to the watcher than the observer. You can find this in Jungian psychology. But I think Rob, probably more than anything, he was influenced by Tibetan Buddhism and the Mahamudra tradition. For me, I can see so many influences here. But, Rob really made this his own.
So I really remember Rob for his enjoyment of kind of pushing to the edges of what we normally say about ourselves and about each other sometimes. And this often made for very exciting lectures from Rob. And I used to really look forward to and anticipate his lectures because you never quite knew what was going to happen. I'm sure Choden won't mind me saying he would be sort of sweating on the side like, Rob's supposed to be talking about the subliminal reflex and where he's gone off on some tangent, taking us on an unexpected journey and some to the edges of what we normally talk about and beyond.
The observer is obsessed with the content of the undercurrent. What that means in daily terminology is we are obsessed with what we are feeling or thinking at any moment. We are obsessed by the sort of moods we're experiencing. And normally we don't use such a strong word, but the dictionary meaning of obsession is constant preoccupation. Constant preoccupation. We are constantly preoccupied with how we're feeling, with what we're thinking. And this is evidenced by the fact that the first thing we ask one another when we meet is, how do you feel? How's your obsession getting on?
Rob had this lovely way of naming things in sometimes a bit a sharp way, like almost a bit insulting. He would say, "You're all content obsessed," and there was laughter on the clip, and I also sensed it here in the room, the kind of recognizing of like, oh yeah, well, yes. So maybe that laughter points at something being truthful there, perhaps. And I guess in the context of this session of looking at mindfulness-based living, how we live, it's worth pausing with that constant preoccupation that we may have, and just, in the atmosphere of noticing what is happening while it's happening, no matter what it is, or without preference, while we may prefer not to be obsessed with ourselves and our own stuff, actually, if the seeing is the doing, then it's worth pausing with it and worth really getting interested in that process that may be at play.
I was fortunate enough to go and visit Rob and Margaret in South Africa a few weeks before Rob died. And, with my little chaplaincy head on, I was curious to know whether Rob knew whether he was dying or not, whether he'd actually been told. And nobody seemed to know. So I kind of said, well, would it be okay for me to have this conversation with Rob about this? And there was a bit of, we're not sure, but if it comes up in the conversation, I'm sure it'll be fine. So I asked him, I said, do you know you're dying? And he said, yes. He said, I know I'm dying. So then I said to him, well, where are you going? He says, I'm going to Dewa Chen. Now, Dewa Chen is Buddha Amitabha's Pure Land. So when we do the Chenrezig practice, we chant about Dewa Chen. And I said, well, what are you going to do to get there? And then he gave me one of those looks that Charlie talked about, and because he said, well, I either will or I won't. Because it's the non-doing that gets you there, not the doing. Just as in meditation, as in death, it's the non-doing that drops us into that sense of infinite loving awareness, Buddha nature, God, whatever you want to call that. And And, I asked him, well, do you want us to do Chenrezig around it? No, I think he just wanted like peace and quiet. But in terms of a final lesson, his final lesson to me was his absolute unconditional acceptance of things as they were. And he was so graceful and kind to the people around him that were looking after him in those times. It was really, really beautiful. And then in my last conversation with him, I said, Rob, you do know I love you, don't you? And he said, yes, and I love you too.
When Rob died, for the first few weeks, I was really trying to communicate with him through the lucid dream state. Because remember, as we said earlier, like in the lucid dream state, you're said to have 7 times the power of mind. And when someone is in the bardo, the after-death states, which can last up to 49 days, they have 9 times the power of mind. Ergo, the easiest way to communicate with a recently dead loved one is through the lucid dream state. So I was really trying to get in contact with him. And I couldn't even dream about him. It just wasn't coming into my dreams. Nothing was happening until the 25th of October. So I think this was about 25 days after Rob died. I remember like around 20-something days around Rob died. And I was on this retreat with this wonderful Dharma teacher called Delton Armstrong. And during the day, we're doing a lot of metta practice. And I was doing all my metta for Rob. So I was spending a lot of time visualizing Rob and sending him love, sending him love, sending him love. And then at night, I became lucid. And it was a very powerful dream. I became lucid and I was at the Cape Town Samazon. And the dream started, people were kind of milling around going, is it there, is it there, is he still there? And I thought they were talking about Rob Nairn's possessions, like are they still there in the place? And then I realized they were talking about Rob. And I went into the room and they were all gathered around Rob. So Rob was sitting, not on like a throne, but on like a high seat, like that. And everyone was sitting in a circle on the floor, like maybe, I don't know, 10 people around him like that. And I realized that he was about to give a teaching. And then it hit me and I was like, what? Rob's dead. So that means I'm dreaming. I'm lucid. And I became lucid. And to see him there, it was almost cliched in the fact he looked so healthy. You know how people say when you see people in near-death experience and stuff, they always look in their healthiest state. It was like that. Rob looked like healthy, about kind of maybe 20 years younger than he did before he died. And I looked at him, I knew I was dreaming, and then I was kind of crying. I said, Rob, one more teaching. Give me one more teaching. What's the final teaching? And then he looked at me, and I know this doesn't exist, this word, but this is what he said. He looked at me, he said, the most important teaching is the aphrodescence of kindness. And I repeated it back to him. I said, the aphrodescence of kindness. And I didn't know what it meant. And I went, is it kindness? Kindness. And he went, kindness, Charlie, kindness. And that for him was the final teaching. And I think that was all of Rob's teachings, right? Everything was about kindness. You know, starting the Mindfulness Association, all of these teachings, wasn't it always about being kind to ourselves? Learning how to be kinder to our emotions, to be kinder to others, to be kinder to the world. And in this lucid dream, it was kindness. Now, I don't know if it was actually Rob, or just my projection of my mind imagining Rob. Either way, I don't know if it really matters. What matters is that for me, the essence of Rob, that final teaching of his, was kindness. And I think that's a wonderful final teaching for him to give.
His marvellous sense of humour and fun was a joy to so many. Also his caring and compassion for anyone around. He gave so generously in so many ways. He was so kind. Once Rob became ill, he spent more time meditating. We had many visitors, including Heather, Choden and Charlie Morley. That was great. Sangha friends came from Cape Town and Zimbabwe. The Padlet, which Heather and the Mindfulness Association team put together in his last months, gave so many people the opportunity to say how much Rob meant to them. And many spoke of what an impact he had had on their lives. Sharing these last few days with everyone here, knowing that each of his friends has their own story to tell of when they met Rob, and then walking around this the stupa on Friday night, followed by lighting 1,008 lamps, butter lamps, has all been such an amazingly special time for Grace, Graham, Mandy and me. Thank you so much, everybody.
Most people say, he changed my life. That's probably the best recommendation of Rob and what a wonderful person he was. Thank you.
I had quite a few intimate discussions with Rob upstairs here. He helped me go and understand some of the challenges I'm facing in my life, yeah, and put things in perspective. And I share this so many times, yeah, whenever I talk about Rob. And he said, well, if you do that, you'll have a good death. And and that has just kept me on such a straight and narrow path that it's like, wow, for him to say something like that is so touching.
Rob's death was a very ordinary death, just like Buddha. We don't think of that, do we? The death of Buddha, died of dysentery, and not a kind of a Hollywood death, right? He died because Buddha was a human, and Rob died a very human death too. And yet, in that very human death that Rob died, think how many times Rob had done Chenrezig practice, how many times he had said that mantra. Would there not have been a moment where he did think of Chenrezig in his dying moments? Absolutely. And he was clear that if you can have the thought of the Buddha or of the teacher or of Akon Rinpoche, his guru, in that moment of death, then enlightenment would open up for him.
His quality is shining everywhere in the world because of his knowledge, wisdom, compassion. Mindfulness is very successful because of Rob Nairn. I think he's not gone. His wisdom is still here everywhere. So you're all following this. So he is never gone. So I think you never need to think he is gone. He is just continued.
The impact it's had on me has really been transformative, and I can really feel the benefit today coming to Sammy Ling, from the daily sits to an event like this, and the way it brings people together, just digitally and in person, just to really share the benefits of mindfulness. I think I'm just really grateful to have this community around me and in my circle of allies, so thank you.
It was great to be able to look through all my books and see how much I quoted him, like how much he appeared in these books, and hopefully how much people have come into contact with his work through them. And through this, through Mindfulness Association. A lot of you are teachers. Every time you teach, you're spreading Rob's teachings. This is the lineage. Lineage is sometimes different when it's not in a Buddhist context. But in this context, you're the lineage. This is it. This is what's left after his death. This is his legacy. Not only his books, but the Mindfulness Association and all of the people that you teach. Everyone you've ever taught settling, grounding, resting with support to, you've taught them something of Rob. You've connected them to Rob Nairn. And by connecting to Rob Nairn, you connect them to Akon Rinpoche and with Lama Yeshe Rinpoche. Again, to the gurus. So this is very good work.
A few people have mentioned the idea of lineage and a teacher being one in a chain. And Lama Yeshe this morning said, Rob isn't really gone. He's here living in all of us. So I think it would be really nice to just take that in terms of what does it mean for each of us. What has been given through Rob or through the ones who Rob taught to you, and for those who are new to this weekend, what have you received this weekend? What has arrived with you that's been passed down through these long lines? And to really feel what that is, and then to maybe think about how am I going to live that? And if I'm going to teach, then I'm passing it on in an obvious way, but if I'm not teaching, then how am I going to live it in how I am? And in that way it passes on and ripples out. So I think this idea of lineage, which is really strong in Buddhism, can feel a bit like plugging into something precious. And that was my sense with Rob, that he sort of transmitted something that was precious, that I could plug into, and then I had it, and I felt really privileged to have it. And I hope that might be a little bit how some of you feel about it.
So let's take a moment to reflect on all the benefit we've received from Rob's teachings, either directly or indirectly, how that has enabled and supported our practice of mindfulness, acceptance, compassion, and insight, and gathering all this benefit in our hearts, and making the wish that this benefit will ripple out into the world, relieving needless suffering, generating happiness and joy, with a sense of humour in ever-widening circles.